So I'm going to introduce you now to Queen Munyai, CEO and Interim Ombudsman, Consumer Goods and Services Ombud, and she's going to be talking about typical scams on online transactions. Her chat will be 30 minutes.
Thank you very much. It's such a pleasure to come after such an emotional discussion. But anyway, I'm going to come in now coming to talk about the Consumer Goods and Services Ombud. I will start off by talking about our office, our mandate, and then later I will talk about what we have seen, which is the complaints that we've seen and what are the trends. After that, then I will then wrap up by talking about what consumers can do through those complaints that we have seen. So CGSO, a lot of people ask us, what is CGSO? What do you do? Okay. Our mission or our mandate as the CGSO, because we are a non-profit organization, we're set up as a non-profit organization, and our mandate is to mediate complaints that arise between consumers and suppliers of goods and services. So we are also there to make sure that we raise standards of good conduct in the industry by generating and increasing the level of certainty in the industry. How do we do that? By educating consumers about their rights and redress in case one of the suppliers breaches the CPA or the code. We also there to guide suppliers on how to implement the CPA and also how to give redress to consumers. So in doing that, we keep track of all the complaints that come before us. And in doing that, we then quantify and pick up if there are any trends. So we report to the National Consumer Commission and to our board of directors and to the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. Our board is constituted of industry players, which are our retailers, manufacturers, consumer bodies, industry associations, and we keep that balance all the time so that our mandate will remain independent in what we do. So in terms of this code that we are implementing, the minister, in terms of the Section 82 of the Consumer Protection Act, may prescribe an industry code, which is what has happened about 10 years ago. Can't believe it's been 10 years since 2013 when the office was first launched. After the industry got together through the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa, who is the industry ombud, and drafted the code, which was then submitted to be promulgated. So the code can be, the minister has the right to promulgate or to make law out of this code, which can be implemented in the industry. So we are an alternative to the consumer, to the National Consumer Commission. Currently, there are only 2 accredited codes in the country, which is the Motor Industry Ombudsman and ourselves, the Consumer Goods and Services Ombud. And both codes were promulgated by the minister, the motor industry, in 2014, and ourselves, we followed in 2015. So what does this, or who are the businesses who are supposed or who are covered by this code? The code is applicable to all participants. Who are the participants? All the suppliers who are trading within the goods and services industry. Unless, and the code says that unless they are regulated elsewhere by a public regulation or a code which is prescribed by the minister. It is mandatory since 2015 when the code became law. It became mandatory for all suppliers of goods and services in the industry to sign up to this organization, which is the Consumer Goods and Services Ombud, and pay their dues. And the code also excludes any complaints which are covered are against the government or any other ombud with jurisdiction. For instance, if the complaint that is brought before us is against a bank, then because we have a banking ombud, we will then send those complaints to them. Or if they are also credit related, then they are dealt with through the credit ombud. Since inception in 2013, which is 10 years ago, we have managed to sign up at group level businesses to the amount of 1,426 by the end of January 2023, which was just a month before our year end. So this is at group level, meaning that if it's a group, for instance, if you look at Massmart, it has so many subsidiaries, so they will subscribe as one group. So we cover all the major retailers in the country, all the manufacturers. And the reason for this is that all consumers of South Africa, if they have an encounter about any goods which are manufactured by any of these, or they purchase them from any of these retailers, even the smallest retailers, they can then bring those complaints to our office, whether these businesses are signed up with our office or not. And that's very interesting because we don't only deal with complaints against those that have registered, even the spaza shops, the informal businesses, as long as they are selling goods which ends up in the hands of the consumer, they are now entitled to sign up to this code and comply to that. So that is just to give a background of who we are so that you can see the context of these complaints and what we have seen in terms of the fraud and that emanate from these complaints that are brought in our offices. If you look at the slide in front of us now, which is the statistics that we gather, we compare the past 3 financial years, one just before COVID 2019-2020, followed by 21-22 and so forth. When you look at it, we have seen a jump of complaints that come to our office in the year 2020-2021. And that was obviously because of the state that we are in. We were always open, and because we were dealing with our consumers through all social media platforms and also through our website, consumers were able to reach us and lodge their complaints. And we have closed complaints to the amount of 13,946 in the year 2021-2022. So if you look at this amount, we've also looked at how we also keep record of where these complaints come from in terms of provincial. We look at, by the way, the Consumer Protection Act is only applicable within South Africa, meaning that if you have a complaint, the supplier that you have purchased from needs to be in South Africa. So the complaints, most of them come from Gauteng, Western Cape, and KZN, and that is mainly because this is our main economical hub. And we also realize that in other provinces, there are very small percentages that are coming into our office. However, we don't believe that those people do not have complaints. It's because perhaps is the means in which they get hold of us, which are things that we constantly work on to improve our presence through education, consumer education, and also the workshops that we handle in those areas. So what is interesting also is that we have seen a jump. If you look at, in fact, let me just go to just one slide after that, you will see that coming from 2019-2020, the complaints that emanate from e-commerce or online transactions were constituting about 4% of our total complaints that we closed during that year, of about 8,600. However, if we move on to 2020, we have now started to see a jump to 27% from 4% in the year before. It has been a norm. Following that year, they remain at about 25%. And this year that we have just closed now in February 2024, 2023, we have seen a 34% amount. That means that most consumers are continuing to transact online. It means consumers have become comfortable in transacting online. However, some people ask now, what kind of complaints are we dealing with, or what are people complaining about? What are the typical online complaints? We've got about 48 categories and of the nature of online complaints, which starts from either bait marketing, non-disclosure of terms and condition, fraud, overselling prohibited goods and services. But you can see there through that chart that the highest number is goods which are not being delivered on time, or they are not delivered within the reasonable time, or the cancellation. But even there, you can see that there is quite a lot of complaints where we are seeing that suppliers who are selling online, they collect monies from consumers without the intention of delivering those goods to at the end of the day to the consumers. So consumers lose a lot of money through purchasing online because suppliers end up not delivering those things that they have done. And we have also picked up a lot of scams in that area, where we see that almost all complaints that are represented here, yes, there are service-related failures, but in terms of that, there are also complaints that deal with the fraud. I think just to show you some of the suppliers that we've picked up, where there are trends, and before we even alert consumers about these fraudulent or scammers that we see who are selling online, it's after several interaction with them, trying to resolve complaints amicably. But a lot of time you find that they are not cooperative. They sometimes close down the websites and open up in a different name, or sometimes they are no longer answering our calls. But at that time, consumers have already paid a lot of money. They are not getting their monies back. So these have been the sectors that we have highlighted, which through the complaints, which are actual complaints that we have seen, you will see that a lot of consumers are complaining about furniture-related clothing and shoes that are being sold online. And that is now when consumers are leveraging the use of social media. We just have to alert consumers that when you are trading online, there are some of the cautious tips that we give to them to be cautious about when they deal with, especially because now you are dealing with a computer, you don't see who's at the other end. Clothing, computer and electronic goods, fireplaces. Recently, we have seen a new scam that was coming on due to the load shedding. We see that there is now all of a sudden a lot of suppliers who are selling inventors, generators, and those that are installing solar services. And a lot of them are not even registered, or they are not qualified to do that, which shows that scammers are also up to date. They are always looking at ways in which they can make more money. I think a lot of other speakers have already touched on that as soon as there's something new, scammers are also moving along to see how they can up their game to be able to get monies out of our consumers in other ways that are fraudulent. So we have seen that often suppliers, both those that are selling online and the ones that are selling through a store, which is brick and mortar, we find that as soon as there are complaints, some of them, the scammers will close down and open the following day next door with a different name, and consumers are left stranded without knowing where they can get their redress. So through that, we have seen that suppliers who are rogue by nature, they often do those tricks. You will find that they end up bullying or kind of pressurizing consumers to pay money they pressurize to pay and say that this is on special, you have to pay within a certain time, and they push until consumers ending up paying a lot of money within a very short space of time. Before they even know it, they find that that was a scam. Had they had enough time, perhaps they would have applied their mind better. They could have acted differently. So we saw that during that time, we have taken a liberty as the office to name and shame some of them so that we can protect our consumers, because consumers become victims of this, and sometimes they do not have a voice, and we are there also sometimes limited in terms of our mandate or in terms of our jurisdiction, but all we are left with is to warn consumers through the press releases that we issue, and be able to alert them of those things. So they will also go to an extent of saying that the stock is very limited. You have to buy quickly. You have to move quickly so that you can move fast, so that they can also get money. But a lot of times we pick up that consumers pay a full amount without, even before they receive the goods or those services that they're looking for. We always want consumers to take caution and pay a deposit, or maybe authenticate. And I'm sure that now we have another platform which now has been launched through the South African Fraud Prevention, the YIMA platform. I think it will come on very handy in terms of the websites, because sometimes if you are not able to see the domain, we have seen a lot of phishing emails that come in where people click on a link and they end up now being vulnerable because of those kind of things. So with this initiative, we think that through collaboration with the fraud prevention services, we will be able to assist our consumers or direct them in terms of how do they protect themselves. A lot of times you'll find that there are guidelines that we share in terms of what should consumers look out for. They must also make sure that they trade with suppliers who are reputable, suppliers who are demonstrating that they are registered with our office. Why do we indicate that? Because all suppliers that sign up with our office, we guide them. We have workshops that we hold with registered suppliers where we guide them on how to give redress to the consumers, how to apply the Consumer Protection Act, what to put on their website. How their websites should also include, in case of a problem, what should consumers do? They must give platforms of engagement, the after-sales service. If anything goes wrong after you have bought this product, do you know what to do? Where can you get hold of us? Those kind of things will help consumers to be able to trade with confidence with the suppliers, knowing that they are making themselves available in order to deal with those complaints after that. So I think the last part that I'm going to touch on is mainly talking about things that we encourage consumers to look out for. And some of them, we see that as soon as the consumers pay the money, those websites get pulled down. Those websites are no longer in existence. And if you try and phone, you'll find that most of them will have only cell phone numbers on their website. There is no landline, there's no physical address where to find these people. So that should just ring a bell. We also encourage consumers to go online and check for reviews. If you go to, there are other platforms where consumers can go in and ask for reviews about a certain supplier who is selling online. And now with YIMA, I think it will also go being another added advantage to that. But most importantly is to make sure that those suppliers are trading within the country, because at the moment the CPA is only covering consumers or suppliers who are based in South Africa. So also with platforms like Facebook, Marketplace, Instagram, and all that, consumers are to note that CPA covers a consumer if they are buying from a business. It should be a consumer to business who are selling goods as ordinary course of business. It shouldn't be individual to individual, because CPA does not cover those private sales. And it will be a problem if you buy those kind of things and you end up not being able to get redress. So those are the things that we highlight and make sure that consumers look out for, so that they can be able to get redress should anything go wrong. On our website, we do list all suppliers that have signed up with us, who are willing and making themselves available to give redress to consumers. There is a list, and there's a link on our website where you can be able to see that. Also, consumers must now look out. In the suppliers that sign up with our office, we give them decals. Those decals, they put them at the door. If you walk around the mall, you'll start to see this kind of decals on the doors of the shops. I've seen them as I move around the malls, that they have now started to put them. And this is where suppliers are saying we are participants of the Consumer Goods and Services Ombud. What does that mean? It means that should anything go wrong, we are willing to redress. And also it should give the consumer confidence that these people, we're not going to look for them and not find them. Because if we cannot find them, then there's an office of the Consumer Goods and Services where they can help us to trace and find this. So these are some of the measures that we continuously implement to try and help the consumers curb these online scams that we are seeing. So we are present in all the social media platforms. We encourage consumers to follow us, and because we often post some tips there and guidelines on how to deal with those kind of challenges. And I see now there's already a question that has been put before me, where it says, does CPA apply, and does CGSO mediate complaints relating to educational institutions? And the answer to this is no. As I said in the beginning, we do not mediate complaints where the complaint is against a organ of state or any educational institution. There are some of the complaints which relates to schools or educational institutions if it's about service, but not against, for instance, there are certain jurisdictions that we have, and sometimes where there are other associations or other platforms, even if they are voluntary, that can deal with those complaints better. We often escalate those complaints to them, because in each and every sector, you might find that even if it's not a registered or it's not an accredited platform, but there are associations which are set up within that particular sector, who are able to give their members much more than what we can give. In that case, we have a relationship with them and we escalate those complaints to them. All we do is follow up and make sure that they get redress. Where mediation fails, we escalate this to the National Consumer Commission, because we are the alternative to the NCC. I think at this point, this is covers the mandate that the office has and what we have seen. And we continue to see a rise, but we are comfortable now looking through the past 3 years that people are now comfortable to purchasing online. But equally, we need to be vigilant, as we want to part with our monies that are very much hardly earned. We need to make sure that we exercise that caution and make sure that all this is done with vigilance, and we should be able to make sure that we are active participants in making sure that we cover ourselves against fraud that may happen. Thank you very much.